Welcome to 7-4, shelf connector and adapter. We're going to start out by grabbing the parts we need and verify the parts we have. First, there's the pogo connector, the 4-pin connector that mates to the one that we just prepped for the lid. And we want the printed adapter that has the side cut out at a corner, or the cutout on the side at a corner rather than the long side. This is how we identify it as the shelf adapter. You're going to want to grab a couple segments of the blue heat shrink and two pairs of the long wires that are pre-pinned on the ends. These are the JST-XH pre-pinned wires that will attach to the circuit board and later on in the build. These wires come somewhere between the length of 15 and probably 19 inches at this point. I can't remember where I am from my last supplier. Says I'd get wires. So we're going to cut all these leads 15 inches from the pinned end. You don't want to cut it the other way or you're going to have to do some splicing. So I'm just grabbing all 4 of these at the same time and running them out with my ruler until I get to about 15 inches. Going longer won't hurt. I found that 15 inches works well for this purpose without a lot of excess wiring in the brain box, all looped around and everything. So we're going to cut those off. And hold on to these scrap segments. You're going to need some jumpers later for the light jig wiring. So put those aside. In essence, don't throw anything away until the thing is totally done. And even then, you might want to save some stuff for scraps. Next is going to be stripping, fluxing, and tinning the wires about 1/8 of an inch up to 1/4 of an inch. You don't want a lot because these pins are pretty short, so you don't need a lot. And we don't want a lot of excess if unnecessary. So like I said, I'm just doing 2 pairs at a time. I'm just trying to be consistent about my lengths, which is why I like using an automatic stripper. Yeah, I'm going to fine twisting one at a time. Works a lot easier than trying to hold 2 and twist 1 with it in the way. These are going to be 22 gauge wires, so they're a thicker wire. I've decided to use just the larger, thicker wire, 22 gauge, for all the wiring, or all the long and shorter leads. The 2 bare-ended pair that went in the lid for the LED doesn't need to be that thick. Okay, so let's see if I can be handy and do 2 of these at a time for the tinning, flex and tinning. There we go. And again, you want it so there's no stray strands splaying out to the side because it's going to be close confines on the connector for these. And we don't want any possibility of shorts. I think I need a little more solder on there. There we go. That's looking good. And the last one. Yeah, I think I forgot to flux that last one, which is why it was give me a little grief taking the solder. There we go. A little flux goes a long way. And the last step is I'm going to want to dab some solder onto those pins of the connector to make sure that solder flows nice and fast. So all those have been pre-fluxed, and the tinned ends of the wires are fine. They've got solder on there now and freshly fluxed, so they'll connect fine. And the last bit, we've pulled out 2 segments of blue heat shrink. We're going to cut each one in half because we don't need to cover that much connection on the pogo connector we're going to be soldering the leads onto. So just kind of get it nice and even, nice and half, and then we got 4 pieces. Like I said, it's nice to stretch the stuff so I don't have to include as much. As noted in the guide, you can rotate the pins. You don't want to bend them, but you can rotate them out of the way to do some soldering to give you a little more room. And that's what I'm going to do in this case. I just rotated them a little bit. Be careful not to try to tip them up or down in a different direction. And in this case, it does say in the guide that we're going to want to solder the darker leads to the inner pins. So I'm going to start with the darker leads on the inner pins and get my flux nice and my solder nice and handy. I like to place the solder roll nearby and have the tip facing upward so I don't need to grab it in order to add some solder to the tip. And there we go, I just grabbed it. Okay, now I'm not going to bother with helping hands for this portion. I just already got solder on the tip of the iron. I'm just going to touch it to that first pin and for a moment let it heat and flow and then let it cool off like that. And it's pretty easy peasy. It's nice when you don't have to line up too much. I'm going to get that wire bent kind of out of the way and do the next pin. Add a little solder to the tip of the iron, and that's what's going to be doing the weld instead of having to hold the lead of the solder. And look at that, nice and fast, and just hold it in place for a second till it cools. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and now do one of the outer pins. Add a little more solder to the tip and do an outer pin. And I'm going to place the lead towards the outside of that outer pin so that when I rotate them back together, I still got nice and clearance and no chance of shorting against the pin next to it. And also, you take care not to let the tip of the iron go to the magnet in the housing, because you don't want to damage the housing. Probably won't damage the magnet too much, but melting the housing, and it's not going to fit that well anymore in place. Now I'm just moving the connector to the other side. I'm going to bend that. And be very gentle with this. I'm going to bend that pin back in, rotate it, not bend it. I'm going to rotate it back towards the center so that I can clip the alligator clip to it a little bit better. There we go. And now for the last lead. Get a little solder on the tip, putting the lead to the outside of the pin. There it goes. It's stuck to it again. Just hold it there for a second. Wham, bam. And then now we're going to want to slide those 4 heat shrinks onto the end of the leads. Again, learned from experience, they will slide onto the pinned ends, but you got to do that now before any housing goes on there. And we're not putting a housing on until later on in the build anyways. As you see, I've slid the heat shrinks right up to the front of the pins on the connector where they'll go, as far as they'll go without it actually trying to turn a corner. All 4 are on there, and I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to gently stroke them from the direction from my hand, so I don't burn myself, towards the connector. I can feel there's still some pull. It still wants to go that direction because towards the magnets. I did turn the temperature of my iron down to its preset of 230. And now just getting it rotated on here. You see that shrunk up on the sides, okay? There we go. And we'll just give a little check and make sure, yeah, they all feel reasonably in place and stuck on there. I think I might try giving it a little rollover on the bottom side, keeping the tip. The iron need to keep that gap from that black housing of the connector. If you feel more comfortable using a lighter for this, it shouldn't hurt a little bit of lighter time on there. Just make sure. There we go. And now we've done this connector and all the heat shrink is on there and there's no chance of shorts and there's no shorting already in there. And the leads are all in parallel and ready for the next step. I do want to note that the way this is going into the build, the wires will end up bending this direction a bit. So sometimes I like to just pre-bend them now so that they're not stressed too much when they go into the project. Actually doing that while the heat shrink is warmer can facilitate it holding that bend. Yeah, it's heated up a little bit. Okay, not a great bend, but it'll still work. The next step is going to be applying the 2 segments of red heat shrink to the 2 pairs of leads that we have on here. So we're going to want to look on here. I've soldered, it looks like the yellow and the blue are next to each other and the green and the white. So the yellow and the blue are going to be paired now permanently. So we're going to want to take the yellow and blue, or whatever colors you have that are adjacent to each other on one side, and we're going to slip those pins into the heat shrink. We only need a little bit of heat shrink on the end of the pins as we fuss and get these wiring slipped into the channels of the TARDIS. So we've got that in there. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of heat from the lighter, just so it snugs up on the on here and doesn't slip off. You don't want it to be super tight all around because you're going to have to remove it as you sneak these in after you're done sneaking them through the TARDIS. So kind of try to get these a little bit lined up there so they're side by side. There we go. Get the heat shrink over it. Hold them together so they're so they're side by side at the ends. And give it a little heat shrink. There we go. Just enough to hold it on there. Again, you want it to be easier to take off later, and the more you shrink it, the harder it'll be to remove. Now that these are prepped, we're going to be grabbing this shelf adapter for the connector, and we're going to slide the two heat shrunk ends of those lead pairs in through the top racetrack pattern of the adapter. You see they fit through there nice. If the connectors were on there already, they would not. And the connectors don't slip through the hidden wire channels of the TARDIS anyhow. So this is the method that has to be done. And we just run it along, and now it's starting to look like the final product. As you see, I'm going to slip it in there, make sure the wires are pointing outwards towards the open corner, side corner. So we know we've got the right adapter already. We know this thing fits, and we just press it right in. Look at that, easy peasy. You see the connector sits flush in the adapter. We've got all four leads in here already, and now we're going to flash this with a little bit of hot glue inside the adapter like we did in the other one, just to make sure it holds into place and doesn't come out on us later. Here I've already just hot glued the inside of that shelf adapter. Again, I filled it with hot glue to connect the sides of the connector to the walls of the adapter. And you want to be careful not, sorry that's blurry, I can't get any lower with the box in the way. You want to be careful not to let the hot glue come up to the top surface of the back side of the adapter. Otherwise it might interfere with fit. Now here's the printed TARDIS, one of the print materials I didn't like. I don't remember what it's called, but it definitely didn't work well for me. You're going to want to identify the front right corner of the hole of the TARDIS. The back obviously is going to be down there where the finger comes through the port for the USB-C connector. So now we've identified where the front is, and there's the front right corner. Let me see if I can raise this up a little bit better, get some clearance. There we go. Now you can see more of my mess. So this is the shelf adapter, and we're going to want to start by running the two lead pairs through the top triangle hole cutout. And if you look in here, hopefully you'll be able to see it. If you look right in here, there's a vertical cutout channel for a portion at the corner post on the inside, and that's where you want those leads to slide into to go down through the rest of the box. It might take a little bit of snuggling, but in this case they all both went down there nice and like they were meant to go there. And just start running the leads in there gently. The reason why we put the heat shrink on, one, so they go down together, but two, so they don't the metal of the pins doesn't snag inside that channel as it goes down. I did not quite prepare to see if how this was going to work on camera. So now holding the box upside down, you see where the two lead pairs came in, and they come into the bottom there of the channel. You're going to want to use a tool to kind of slip those out because they don't like to come out on their own. So I've just got some tweezers here. And you see I can pull one out nice and easy. I got to reach around behind it and pull the other one out. There. Okay. Now that that's done, we can continue sliding, and then I'm going to turn it over some, and you can see there's the adapter now. We've taken up the slack, and we're going to want to rotate this guy so he orients to that opening for him, and we're going to want to slide that right into place. There. Now you see the adapter sits flush with the shelf that the lid is going to sit on. The connector is flush at the top of the adapter, and as you can see, the wiring goes into that corner channel, and this wiring is going to be hidden later when we put in the light jig. So all the wiring of the whole box is concealed. The only evidence of it having any power are, one, the connectors between the shelf and the lid, and then the USB port on the back side of it. That's why I like it so much. As you can see inside when they look in for their snacks, those wires are hidden all along this space. And they come out here. I've just set up for the next section, but before I go, I do want to mention you can go ahead and hot glue that the inside the box, the bottom of that shelf adapter to the box itself, so it doesn't pull out if it didn't feel like there was much friction. I did not do so in this case because I plan on undoing all this because I don't like this print of the box itself in this material. But go ahead, and if you can get your glue gun in there, go ahead and secure that adapter on the inside of the TARDIS shelf so that it doesn't come out on you later, and then you'll have to go through a bunch of shenanigans to get it secured.